Something 5 secret rate negotiation scripts big clients hope freelancers never learn exposed. Last week, a freelancer in my community sent me her rate negotiation email chain. She landed $12,000 more per project, using one phrase her client's procurement team literally trains people to reject. And here's what made me actually angry when I read it. The company she was negotiating with, they have a 47-page internal document teaching their buyers how to beat freelancers down on price. 47 pages of psychological tactics designed to make you feel grateful for less than you deserve. I know this because a former procurement manager sent me that exact document 3 months ago. And today, I'm going to hand you the scripts that make their training completely useless. Before I show you these 5 scripts, you need to understand something that changed how I think about every client conversation. Big companies don't pay based on value. They pay based on confidence patterns. Their buyers are trained to detect uncertainty in your voice, your emails, your proposals. And the second they smell hesitation, their job is to push you down 15 to 40% from your opening number. But here's the thing they don't want you to know. The same psychological triggers they use against you, they work in reverse. I'm going to show you the exact phrases that flip their tactics back on them. Script number 4 literally made a procurement manager tell one of my students, quote, "I've never had a freelancer say that before," and then approve her rate without a single counter. And script number 5? That's the one most freelancers are too scared to use, but it's worth more than the other 4 combined. The first script is called the uncomfortable anchor, and it exploits a cognitive bias that procurement teams pray you don't understand. Here's what typically happens. A client asks for your rate. You panic internally, lowball yourself by 20% because you're scared of losing the deal, and then spend the entire project resenting the money you left on the table. Sarah, a brand strategist in my community, used to charge $3,500 for brand identity packages. Good work, fair price, but she was barely covering her costs after revisions and meetings. I told her to try the uncomfortable anchor on her next discovery call. The script goes like this. When they ask about pricing, you say, "Based on the scope you've described, this typically falls into our $8,000 to $12,000 range, depending on complexity." Before we get into specifics, though, I want to make sure I fully understand your timeline pressures. Notice what happened there. You anchored high, but you didn't pause for reaction. You immediately redirected to their problems. This is critical because procurement people are trained to stay silent after you quote a number. That silence is designed to make you nervous and start negotiating against yourself. By immediately asking about their timeline, you've taken control of the pause. Sarah used this exact script. The client's first response? They said, "That's higher than we budgeted." Sarah didn't flinch. She said, "I understand. What did you have in mind?" They said $6,000. She got $6,000. That's $2,500 more than she would have asked for originally. And here's the part that matters. The client respected her more. They actually apologized for the budget constraints. They didn't try to nickel and dime her on revisions. When you anchor with confidence, you change how they categorize you in their mind, from vendor to expert. Script number 2 is the budget reversal. And this one makes procurement teams genuinely uncomfortable because it breaks their entire playbook. You've heard some version of this before. Client says, "What's your rate?" Most freelancers answer directly, which immediately puts you in a defensive position. The budget reversal flips this completely. When they ask about your rate, you respond, "I'd love to give you an accurate number." To do that, I need to understand something first. What have you budgeted for this initiative? And what would success look like at that investment level? This script does 3 things simultaneously. First, it signals that your pricing is customized, not commodity. Second, it forces them to reveal their budget before you reveal your rate. Third, and this is the sneaky part, it makes them justify their budget to you. Marcus, a UX designer I worked with, tried this on a startup that had previously hired designers at $75 an hour. When he asked about their budget, they said they were thinking around $10,000 for the project. He said, "At $10,000, I can deliver a complete redesign of your 3 core user flows with usability testing. If you wanted the full experience audit with competitive analysis, that's typically in the $16,000 range. Which outcome matters more right now?" They went with $16,000, but here's what's really important. Marcus told me later that he was originally planning to pitch $8,000 because he was nervous about the company's size. By asking about their budget first, he discovered they had more money than he assumed. This happens constantly. Freelancers leave thousands on the table because they project their own money stories onto clients who have completely different financial realities. Script number 3 is the scarcity stack, and this is the one that gets the most pushback when I teach it. People tell me it feels manipulative, but I want you to consider something. Every major company you've ever worked with has used artificial scarcity on you. Limited time offers, exclusive pricing, spots filling up. They manufacture urgency because it works. The scarcity stack just applies their own tactics ethically. Here's the framework. When you're in a negotiation and they're pushing back on price, you say, "I should mention, I'm currently booked through the end of March. I have 1 project slot opening in April, and I typically fill those 8 to 10 weeks out. If timing is flexible on your end, I'm happy to hold that slot for 48 hours while you discuss internally." Real deadline, real constraint, no manipulation. You're just stating facts about your calendar. Even if your calendar isn't packed right now, you can adapt this. Maybe you say you're limiting new clients this quarter. Maybe you have a waiting list for discovery calls. The key is that scarcity must be true. Fake scarcity destroys trust the moment they discover it. Jennifer, a copywriter who specializes in SaaS onboarding emails, used this script last month. The client had been dragging their feet for 2 weeks, trying to negotiate her from $4,200 down to $3,000. She sent 1 email with the scarcity stack. Within 4 hours, they approved $4,200. No more negotiation, no more back and forth, because suddenly, their fear of losing her outweighed their desire to save $1,200. If this approach to negotiations is clicking for you, hit subscribe. I drop one of these every single day, and tomorrow's video covers something even more valuable. Now, when you're crafting these scripts, your delivery matters as much as the words. I've been using 11 Labs to practice my negotiation tone before client calls. You can literally type your script, hear it back in a confident voice, and adjust your own delivery to match. I'll drop a link below if you want to test it yourself. Script number 4 is called the value reframe, and this is the phrase that made that procurement manager say he'd never heard a freelancer respond that way before. When a client says your price is too high, most freelancers do one of 2 things. They either immediately offer a discount, which tanks their credibility, or they get defensive, which makes the client dig in harder. The value reframe does neither. You say, "I hear you, and I want to make sure you get the right solution. At a lower price point, here's what changes." Then you list 2 or 3 specific things you'd remove. Not threateningly, factually. You might say, "At the $4,000 level, I'd remove the competitive analysis and deliver the core strategy document without the implementation roadmap. The timeline would also extend from 3 weeks to 5, since I'd need to batch this with other projects. Does that work better for your needs?" Suddenly, they're not negotiating your price. They're evaluating whether the cheaper version actually solves their problem. And 80% of the time, they realize it doesn't. They either approve your original rate or they meet you in the middle at a number you're actually comfortable with. Script number 5 is called the walk-away frame. And I saved this for the end because it requires something most freelancers haven't developed yet: genuine detachment from the outcome. Here's the script. When negotiations have stalled and they're stuck at a number that doesn't work for you, you say, "I really appreciate you considering me for this. Based on where we are on budget, I don't think I'm the right fit for this project right now. If circumstances change, I'd love to revisit the conversation." Then you stop talking. You don't explain. You don't justify. You don't hint that you might be flexible. You just express genuine appreciation and bow out gracefully. This feels terrifying the first time you do it. Your brain screams that you're losing money, that you should just take the lower rate, that something is better than nothing. But here's what actually happens more often than you'd expect. They come back, sometimes within hours, sometimes days later, almost always at a higher number. Daniel, a video editor I've coached, walked away from a $6,000 project because they insisted on $4,000. 2 weeks later, they emailed asking if he was available. Their original editor fell through. They paid $7,500. The walk-away works because it does something no other script does. It proves you don't need them. And that proof fundamentally changes how they value you. Now here's where all 5 scripts connect into something bigger. Remember that procurement document I mentioned at the beginning? The 47-page training manual? Page 23 has a section called Vendor Vulnerability Indicators. It lists 11 signs that a freelancer will accept a lower rate. Things like responding too quickly to emails, using phrases like "I hope" or "I think" instead of "I recommend" or "I will." Asking if the price works for them instead of stating the price and moving forward. Every single script I just gave you eliminates multiple vulnerability indicators from that list. The uncomfortable anchor eliminates the pause vulnerability. The budget reversal eliminates the information asymmetry vulnerability. The scarcity stack eliminates the availability vulnerability. The value reframe eliminates the defensive response vulnerability. And the walk away eliminates the biggest one of all,